Cool. Thanks everyone for being here. Some of you might have heard parts of this talk, but every time I give this talk, I evolve it a bit. So hopefully there is enough new things for you to look at. I thought it is fun to think about this question of what would a startup founders look like going forward. Last night I was at this professional gathering where a bunch of people I knew or a bunch of new people, we were just having drinks on a rooftop patio, which has opened for the first time in month in Toronto. And one of the people there was like, what's a big challenge you're working on these days? And I said, well, you know what I'm very interested in figuring out is how to become how to increase the revenue of my business to be more than a million or a few millions before bringing in any more full-time employees. As the only full-time employee with some assistants and some subcontractors, can I get my business to be more than $1 million in revenue? And that's a very interesting question. And probably a few years ago, somebody saying this, everybody would have laughed, but today everybody's like, maybe it's not that far, right? So and today I want to mostly talk about how far we are from that, in my opinion. So I think a founder in 2034 would look like this. Essentially, they are powered by this exoskeleton that has 4 important arms. One of these is sales and marketing, very important. One of them is product and engineering. One of them is internal operations, and one of them is human and machine resources. And essentially, all of these arms enable this founder to run the business and scale it and do all the necessary things, probably with a very, very small number of full-time employees, and mostly relying on, gigified work as well as automated and assisted and augmented processes using machine workers. So hopefully nobody here argues that this is not going to happen. I think this is going to happen. We are giving ourselves 10 years to get there. Might be sooner, might be a little later, but I think we are getting closer and closer to this relatively crazy sci-fi kind of scenario, right? So, and by the way, notice that I'm not saying that humans will be completely removed from the story, because I don't think that's going to necessarily happen in the next 10 years. I think they will be significantly re-skilled and repurposed in terms of how they interact with the systems. As I said, I think an important part of this H&MR department, instead of HR department going forward, is going to be humans that do gigafied type of work. Not necessarily full-time employees, but employees that get chosen by probably algorithms that are very careful at, very good at picking the right, experts to do work, bring them in, they do their work, they get offboarded, etc., etc. So there's a lot of interesting things around future work that we can get into, but that's a whole different talk, and I'm not going to go there. I'm more interested in the rest of the core that is going to essentially enable us to get to this point. So currently, this great thing is the current user experience that a startup founder in 2024 has to go through. They think, well, I woke up this morning and X is a task that needs to be done today. So they have to figure out what that task is, what are the details of it, prioritize the details of the task and or that task in relationship to other things they have to do. Then they have to essentially start operating and doing that task using a lot of different tools that all of them have different user experiences and different ways of interaction. Then occasionally they probably reflect, is the task done or not? They might refine it, repeat it, go to the next task. Just go through this very manual workflow and the process of figuring out what needs to be done, pick it up, start breaking it down, do it, repeat, etc., etc. And one of the biggest bottlenecks is really around this part. Like everything about this is a bottleneck, but this part is especially where you have to do a lot of context switch to different products, different tools as you're doing your work as a founder. It is hugely damaging, right? Um, so part of this problem is coming from the fact that, first of all, as humans, we have to be involved in a process because some of the prioritization, we are the only type of machine and or animal who can handle that currently. But also the user experience of the tools that we use to manage our thoughts or processes and work is what it is. It is, it is what we have. It is, menus um, web browsers and all of those good things, right? So the user experience is very, very limiting. And as a solo founder or as a small team of engineers, let's say, it's very, very challenging to figure out what to do, when to do it, because it just takes so much time to get anything done. So if I want to summarize the details of the current user experience, here's the list. It's very structured. You don't have to read it. There are very predefined UIs that you're going through. Just everything about it is just pretty fixed and rigid. And of course, we've gotten excited about large language models after ChatGPT, and we are like, can we LLMify everything? And of course, that's an exciting new frontier because, even, for the majority of the past decade, conversational interfaces have been quite attractive. And for specific types of use cases like call center handling and all of that, there has been some progress in actually using them very effectively. But in the past few years, because of the flexibilities that LLMs have now, we are taking this to the next level. Like we are really getting excited about, oh, maybe LLMs can also handle many, multi-turn conversations and very complex reasonings. And as we saw in the last talk, even go all the way to data analysis and business intelligence and all of those good things. But obviously, the part that LLMs drastically suck at is being predictable, is being able to verify whatever it is that they are supposed to do, because they don't have a sense of groundness. Like they're statistical machines. They're producing what they quote unquote think is the right next thing to do. And we are using these in this sort of an emergent type, set of use cases beyond what they were trained to do, and we are hoping for the best. So there are a lot of interesting questions around the user experience and even like how to control the behavior of these systems that are still completely unanswered, and we're sort of slowly making progress on it. Speaking of slowly making progress on it, if you go to Google Trends and look for AI copilots without that typo that I have there, then you'll see obviously a upward trending graph that is indicating that, well, people are actually very excited about these kind of things, because conceptually, the idea of having a co-pilot of any sort in any system for any task, for any workflow, is very attractive, because we don't any longer need to have an army of assistants and interns and junior employees that we just throw all the mundane tasks to them. We can just pull up the phone and talk to a co-pilot and get them to do the business intelligence for us, to do the research for us, to write the article for us. So it is attractive. It is something that a lot of people want, and sooner or later, robust versions of this are going to show up. Again, as we saw for the case of business intelligence in the last talk. I want to do a quick recap of how our thinking about AI products has evolved over the past 18 months. So obviously, the one that we all know and love is ChatGPT. So the LLM powering ChatGPT was around, has been around for a few years, and even the latest updates to it, the quality that ChatGPT showed, what was available, really. The interesting thing that happened when ChatGPT became the phenomena was the fact that they made a very interesting product decision. And instead of it being just available through a playground to a bunch of nerds like myself, they decided to improve it a little more, strap on a UI, and make it available as a chat interface. So that was quite interesting. Like, that was an interesting product choice. That's part of the reason that it became very, very attractive. But ultimately, it was a very, 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 very simple product. It was a UI plus a large language model. And very, very quickly, we came to realize all the limitations that it had, including, not being up to date, not having access to other types of information that were not part of the training data, hallucinations being a symptom of all the above. So, RAG, or retrieval augmented generation type of products, started showing up. Again, like, RAG has been around for a while, but all of a sudden it came to the forefront. Like, people started paying attention to it. And the interesting thing that RAG did was, and I think that's a very important nuance, is that it acknowledged that the language model is a linguistic interface. It's just connecting the front end to the back end that is data. So you're just separating the interface, the linguistic interface, and the data layer. And this was important because, now you could feed it any type of new data. You could feed it the company data. You could feed it without necessarily retraining the model. You could just feed it the important information and have it do the so-called in-context learning, pick up the information from that and handle the task at hand. But, again, this was pretty, I call it baby RAG. So that's the pretty simple version of how things can unfold. And unfortunately, or fortunately, a lot of vector database companies started popping up, and all of them, for their SEO reasons, had to write the simplest possible system you can set up to use their vector database. So the internet became full of articles about how you can build products in this structure, because you could just strap on an LLM on top of a vector database with a simple UI and you have a product. And that was misleading. And a lot of people started thinking that they have a product while what they had was an interesting project. So in order to make this turn it into a proper product, often you have to start thinking about all the things software, which means, security, privacy, scalability, relevance of the data that is retrieved, that is not just semantic relevance, guardrailing the behavior of the system, and a lot of other things, right? So you have to really start thinking about, how is the system interacting with the outside world? How can I keep track of things in a working memory and feed it back to the system? And all of those good things that makes the system a lot more nuanced, but also interesting and robust and scalable. And of course, agents became a rage, which in my opinion are pretty much, if you want to wave your hands and talk about them, are the same as proper RAG systems, except that they are also capable of tool usage, like code interpreter or scikit-learn and pandas, like in the last talk. And they can also come up with policies and planning for solving a particular type of problem, right? And that's what we call agents. And we've been very excited about agents because they have the potential to do what I described the 2034 founder is going to need to do. Because, imagine, as this has been discussed, an army of agents that are specialized in a few different areas of the workflow that you're interested in, and each of them run out and do the thing and come back and provide results. And you essentially have a multi-agent system that is interacting with humans, They even assign tasks to humans. So imagine what, all of the things that humans have to do together today. Now there is the possibility of these multi-agent multiplayer systems, where a central brain or a central workspace is assigning work to different agents, including humans and machines, and they interact and bring information back into a central place, and all of those good things, and really augmenting the business workflow process that we are interested in. So this, I think, is where we are going. So we are sort of wrapping our heads around what I call that transition from baby RAG to proper RAG, and starting to touch on agents, but at the research level at least, and hopefully very soon at the products level, we are going to start seeing more and more robust multi-agent systems that will actually do more of the workflow rather than being just a point solution in a specific part of the business workflow. So, and when I talk about multi-agent systems, multi-agent multiplayer systems, I have to plug what we are building, Sherpa. You could interact with Sherpa as an open source library. You can go to those links, look at them. We like to talk about Sherpa as an AI augmented thinking companion. So generally speaking, since a lot of the types of problems that we are interested in are knowledge intensive and require thinking and reasoning and tool usage, we think that Sherpa should be a thinking companion. It should help you think better and make better decisions. And the architecture of Sherpa is very similar to what I described. It is essentially a multi-agent system where there is some sort of an agent in it that comes up with a plan, some sort of a critic that provides feedback, some sort of a researcher that has access to a set of tools, like looking at research papers or search engines or gathering information, some type of analyzer. You could imagine this one being Pandas AI, for example. So Sherpa is the library that manages all of these interactions and activities with each other. And I've been going around talking more and more about knowledge ops, where we use systems and technologies like these to operationalize knowledge-intensive workflows. And I think that's the new front. That's where a lot of interesting things are going to happen, because knowledge has been traditionally very human-centric, but going forward, we are going to delegate more and more of it to machines. As Gabrielle said, they're starting to even understand the data better than us, because we have very limited, brain capacity to think about a lot of nuances at the same time. And in order to get to this knowledge ops sort of regime or universe, really what we need is three sets of things, in my opinion, which is language skills, reasoning skills, and tool usage. And all of these are provided by LLMs today, or at least beginning to. Things like natural language understanding, natural language generation, and inference. These are things that have been around for years, but LLMs have taken them to a whole new level. The ability to reason. This is the weakest point of what they can provide today, but they're getting better. We could train models that are specifically good at these kind of activities like planning and task decomposition. But importantly, they can also do tool usage, most importantly and most crucially because they can write code, which can be then used to communicate with other systems that generate diagrams or do math or navigate the web and all of those good things. So all of these capabilities are kind of sort of present in LLMs, and they're getting better. But also because we know that these are necessary, we are specifically intentionally improving these abilities in these models. So if we go back to our poor gray founder in 2024 and think about how all of those will help her in 2034, essentially we have this nice colorful picture of the universe where she no longer has to interact with a bunch of different user experiences and do a lot of knowledge intensive work on her own. but you can delegate this to agents that will use their different types of skills to carry out these tasks. So that was 2024 and 2034, but how close are we, and what needs to happen for us to move forward? I've shown this table before. One thing that I really like is comparing what is happening in LLM agentic workflows with what has been happening in autonomous driving. More than happy to share this table with you offline if you want to look at it. I don't want you to look at all of it. I really want to just look at this part and say, I think we're, in terms of what LLM agents can do these days, we are at level 3 of automation comparing to autonomous vehicles, because we still need humans to be very involved in the process and really operate the system, with the LLM agent being really a co-pilot rather than a pilot, if you wish. And the purpose of this level 3 autonomy is really to facilitate the works that humans do, and ideally work that humans do together, right? Like if a bunch of humans are trying to collaborate to achieve a task, the hope is that the agents would sit inside that workflow and enable humans to do more, communicate better, get tasks done in a cheaper way, generate more revenue, and all of those good things. And I don't think we are too far from this. Like, my expectation is that in the next 2 or 3 years, you're going to see significant amount of level 3 autonomous agents integrated into workflows that we will see. But in order to see that happen, we need you, technical people and product people and founders, to really start thinking about what does it take to build these products. And I want to wrap up my talk by the main part of it, which is really my product commandments. So commandment number 1 is thou shalt not count on LLMs beyond linguistic interfaces. I've been talking to a lot of people who are trying to use LLMs as silver bullets. Like they were hoping that LLMs would do reasoning and read their mind and write code and schedule things in their calendar. And yes, you could achieve that, but you cannot just tell the LLM that that's what you want to do and hope that it will do it in a robust and consistent way. What these models are linguistic interfaces, and that's what we can use them for. If you want them to do anything else, then you have to set them up to do that. And of course, LLMs today have limitations. They hallucinate. They are unpredictable. As the first talk today talked about non-deterministic user experiences, really, like, these have to be at the forefront. Like, you cannot say, oh, they will get better later, because they are what they are today. And that's where we are in terms of the tools we have access to build. So when you're building a product, you have to start from there and think what user experience is necessary to set up this system to deliver value to the user. The next thing is thou shall separate the data and interface layers. I think this is very important. A lot of people that I interact with think or design in a way that the LLM ends up being the source of knowledge. That's a very risky thing to do. That's a very bad idea. You have to try your best in terms of prompting, system design, architecture, and all of those things to make sure LLM is least likely to use, quote unquote, its own knowledge, and only relies on the information that is provided to it to provide an answer. Of course, this will change as we go forward, but a good system design is to separate these, because it gives you a lot of other abilities like layering, security, privacy, and all of those good things on top of your data that you should not delegate to the LLM, at least anytime soon. And of course, this is part of a broader comment. Again, something that I see quite a bit is that probably to some extent the fault of the vendors who are trying to make it sound very simple to build products, and it is not. Like, it is ultimately a software product, so it has all of the necessary software components. You have to do all of those things, and you have to follow all good software design practices. Otherwise, you won't have a robust product at the end of the day. So you really have to take a step back and think, okay, I did a quick POC with the vector database and LLM. Now what? Like, where should I go from here? What are the tools that I can pull together, and what are the modules and architectures that are necessary to deploy the system in a reliable and robust way? The next thing is that LLMs cannot read your mind. I've seen people who are trying to write a short question, and this is related to prompting too, because good prompting practices mean that you explain the hell out of everything to the LLM. So sometimes I'm seeing that people are hoping that I would just say a short thing, it will do reasoning and figure out what the right workflow is, and based on that it will do this task, and then they complain, oh, it didn't do it, so it is stupid. Well, it cannot read your mind. It has assumptions about how things happen, but in reality, if you're looking for a robust system, you have to create guardrails. You have to really think about what is the workflow that is done by humans, what are the standard operating procedures that humans follow, and how would the software architecture replicate that process. So with a lot of clients that I'm working with, they would come to me with their engineering team saying, oh, we can't get it to do this behavior we want. And and the answer often is, well, if you as a human were to do this, what are the steps that you would go through? And then try to replicate those same steps in the architecture, in the LLM calls that are happening, not necessarily always through prompting, but it could also be training small models to throw them in to route the questions to different parts of the system, or tasks to different parts of the system and such. So you really have to, again, like, you cannot skip the product development stage. Like, you have to understand the current process, then you have to integrate your LLM into it, replicating that workflow. Maybe one day, the same way that we don't fly the way nature does, maybe one day that system evolves into something that is not really the workflow that humans have. But the fact of the near-term use cases is that it has to reflect that workflow, because that workflow is a standard operating procedure for a reason, right? So next one is, those shall follow evaluation-driven development. Again, like, I'm interacting with clients who ask me, should I use open source or closed source? Should I use this prompting method or that one? This chunking method or that one? And copy paste that question and change the details of it 100 times. The answer is still the same. Well, what are you trying to improve? What is the problem you're trying to solve? Because if you don't have an evaluation, the number of models you can look at is infinite. The number of things you can fix is infinite. But which one should you focus on? Like, what's the biggest thing in your evaluation set that is going wrong, right? So if you don't have a good way of articulating what good means, then you're probably moving randomly in a space of possibilities, and most probably that means that you're not working on the most important task at hand. The next thing is, thou shall respect reviewer too. Hopefully some of the audience relates to this. So reviewer two is, for those of us who have published papers, know that there's usually this reviewer two who reviews the paper you wrote, and they say very critical things about it, and you always hate them. And sometimes they're right, sometimes they're not, but they always say extremely critical things. And the important thing about reviewer two and the academic publishing process is that reviewer two is often a person that is not you. It's a different person. It's not a person who has written the paper. So I see a lot of people use, or even a lot of scientific papers, suggest using the same large language model or same model in general to critique what the model has produced. And that's a horrible idea. That has a lot of biases in it, that has not necessarily like that reviewer too hopefully is trained to be good at critical feedback. The reviewer too is really bad at articulating it usually in reality in publishing, but hopefully a good reviewer too would be a person who's trained, who's specialized to critic, to look at nuances that are important, and provide that feedback to you. Now, if you're using, the same GPT-4 that has generated your response to review the response, are you doing it right? So in most cases, the answer is no. You have to have a different system. It could be as simple as heuristic. Like we in Sherpa, we use heuristics extensively to critique the outputs of, we have like very simple heuristics that review the output, provide feedback to the LLM, and then the LLM tries again or does something different, right? So it has to be a different system. It has to be a different model that provides feedback. And that is very important because otherwise you will have compounding errors in a system. And, a part of the agentic workflow is doing something that is slightly incorrect, and that will just propagate throughout the workflow and, messes up everything. A lot of the use cases for LLMs are productivity. And this is a bit of a one-person opinion, but I feel very strongly about it. A lot of people are building separate apps, and you're trying to throw the separate app into my toolbox of apps that I use and telling me, hey, this yet another app, in addition to the 25 that you're already using, is going to increase your productivity. Maybe, maybe not, most probably not, especially if you're talking about business workflows. Having one more app to pay attention to means that you're just adding clutter to my life. So you have to think very carefully and very long about the question of, does this need to be a separate app? Can it be an integration inside what I'm already using? And this is so important for the user experience, because if you provide yet another app for me to take a look at, it is taking me outside of my workflow. I'm going somewhere else, doing the thing, coming back. It's just bad. It's just a bad user experience, right? So you have to, if your premise is productivity, you have to think very carefully about, where do people do their work? How do they do their work? And how can your thing with minimum interruption be added to what they're doing to actually increase their productivity, right? For that reason, a lot of the products that we build are simply integrations and plugins inside wherever you do your work. Like if it is a Slack, it will be a plugin inside a Slack. If your user experience, the most common place where you do your work is Microsoft Word, it will be a plugin in Microsoft Word, right? So really thinking deeply about the nuances of productivity is very important. And of course, like you can imagine a world where things will evolve. And again, like one system would replace multiple systems, but we're talking about near-term applications and commandments with what is necessary to happen for these products to be adopted in the near term. And that brings me to the last point, which is, of course, ultimately you're designing for humans. So you have to think about that. You cannot design for this imaginary future where everything will be automated. Like in the near term, humans are going to be part of the equation. So you have to think about that carefully. And that means that you have to test, evaluate, verify, repeat many, many times. Because if you cannot figure out what humans really need, understand, and can interact with, they're not going to use it. Therefore, you're not going to have a product. Right? And importantly, another part of this is that not using it is a benign bad outcome, but there's also a non-benign bad outcome, which is you might build a product that harms people. You might build a product, get somebody fired. It does some racist behavior, and somebody gets upset and commits some action that is unfortunate, right? So you have to really think carefully about how what you're building impacts humans. And that includes, job loss. Like, you have to think about, how can I build this in a way that augments people rather than replace them? So there are a lot of interesting nuances there, and it gets a little philosophical, and you can get to that if you want. But as a product person, I think you have to think about this. And lastly, in my opinion, there are two types of product teams and founders. The first type are the ones who know and understand that the user adoption and trust is their bottleneck. And the rest of product teams, in my opinion, are just doing science fair projects. This is so important because I talk to founders all the time. I was like that myself. I was not thinking that, how is the end user going to adopt this? What kind of complexities do they have in their workflow, in their business workflow, that will prevent them, that will create a friction in front of them using what it is that I'm building, the technology that I'm providing. Especially as technical people, we get really excited about the technical aspects that, oh my God, look at what this can do. And we forget to think about, oh, how will the human feel about this, right? And that feeling is the thing that will prevent users adopting your product if they feel threatened, if they feel uncomfortable, if they feel confused about it, right? If they don't trust it, if they interact with it a few times, sometimes gives the right answer. 90% of the time it gives the answer you need. 10% it doesn't. Then you have to just keep guessing. Is this 1 out of 10 times the wrong one or the right one? If it's the purpose of the product. So really thinking deeply about, and on the very forefront, that adoption is what you're going for, and what does your product need to do to achieve that, to achieve their trust, to win their trust, is super important. And if you're not thinking about it, in my opinion, all you're doing is a science fair project, unfortunately, or fortunately. Maybe that's all you want to do. That's all. Thank you so much for listening. More than happy to talk to you all about any of the above. Reach out to me on LinkedIn and or book me through this link. And